Right, fabulous. It's a lovely little jazzy introduction to this evening. Thank you so much for that. So, welcome everyone to our Friday night salon. This evening, we are joined by Kristopher Jansma. We are so excited to have him here. This is Obsessions and Pet Peeves, writing about what we love and what we can't stand in celebration of this fabulous book, Revisionaries, what we can learn from the lost, unfinished, and just plain bad work of great writers, which is a really, really fantastic book. If you have not yet gotten your hands on it, stay with us for the evening. We're going to have a chance for you to win your own copy of Revisionaries, but also, if you do not win, please do pick up a copy of this incredible book. It is so, so helpful for anyone who has ever written or thought about writing. It really kind of takes you through the process of how great writers I struggled with a lot of the same things that we did, and we do in the creation of their fantastic works. So we can jump on in. To begin, please do, if you feel comfortable doing so, turn your videos on. We would love to see your faces as you are collaborating here with us this evening. If you don't feel comfortable turning your cameras on, that is cool. Please do. I make sure that you are engaging in the chat so that we know that you're there. You can introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where you are calling in from this evening. And please do add to your Zoom name. If you are a mentee, you're going to add TEE for mentee. If you are a mentor, you're going to add TOR for mentor. If you are a guest with us here this evening, welcome. So glad you're here. Please add GUE to the beginning of your name. You're also going to put in your first name and the first initial of your last name. Then please include your pronouns so that we can refer to you correctly as we get chatting, and the phonetic spelling of your first name. So you can enter all of that. If you go to your participants button towards the bottom of the screen, you'll find your name towards the top. You can click more next to your name and click rename. Should pop up a little box that you can type all of that info in. We really appreciate you doing that. It lets us know who is in the room so that we can get a good sense of what's going on. And I'm already seeing some people doing that. Thank you so, so much. It is lovely to have you all here this evening. All right, and now, what are we doing tonight? So those are all cool things that you can do in the future, but you are here and right now. And so we are really excited to dive in. We're going to first embrace revision as a natural and vital part of the creative process, because it is. It is. Hopefully everyone here is really, I started to feel that already. But we are going to gain behind the scenes insights into the making of Revisionaries and hear about that process of how that book was created. We are sparking new ideas through creative exercises offered by the author. We've got some really incredible writing prompts for you to engage in. And as per usual at Girls Right Now, we are writing in community. So we're going to write together. We'll share some stuff. It's going to be really fantastic. Okay, so to begin, we're going to start with our opening lines activity. If you have been a part of a Girls Right Now event before, you know opening lines very well. This is really our goal here is to take you from wherever you were before this event and transition you into your here now, your present, your writing, your creating. And this one in particular, I really, really love as an opening lines because it gets at what we're trying to do here, which is think about revision. How can we make things better, right? So you're going to take this opening. You can use whatever pronoun you would like. She, he, they. Maybe this character has all three pronouns. That's cool too, right? So take whatever you would like. Think of a character, and they looked at it closely. It was good, but it could be better. What you do is take those sentences, take 5 minutes to write the beginning of a scene with these lines as the opening. Think about what images come to mind for you, what characters emerge. Let yourself be kind of free with it. We're going to write for about 5 minutes, and then I would love to hear some shares if possible. So we're going to play some music while we. So next, I am really excited to get to introduce you to our incredible author of the evening. We go. 1 second while the slide comes up. So we are so excited to have Kristopher Jansma here. He is the author of Revisionaries, What We Can Learn from the Lost, Unfinished, and Just Plain Bad Work of Great Writers. And the novels Our Narrow Hiding Places, Why We Came to the City, and The Unchangeable Spots of Leopards. He is the winner of the Sherwood Anderson Foundation Fiction Award, a Pushcart Prize, and the recipient of an honorable mention for the Penn Hemingway Award. His short fiction, distinguished in the Best American Short Stories 2016, has been published in The Sun, Alaska Quarterly Review, Prairie Schooner, Story, ZYZZYVA, and elsewhere. Kristopher is an associate professor of English and director of the creative writing program at SUNY New Paltz College, a really fantastic school. If you've not been up there, it's a beautiful part of the country. And thank you so much for being here, Kristopher. I will let you take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me, and thanks for letting me join the salon tonight. And It's really been, yeah, it's been a treat already. I wrote a page, which I hadn't done yet today, so I'm pretty excited about that. Yeah, I wanted to let's see. Sorry, hold on. Here we go. Get my notes ready. They asked me to talk a little bit about my, I guess, my journey as a writer. So I thought I'd start with that. I just recently published this book that we're going to talk about tonight. It's called Revisionaries. What we can learn from the lost, unfinished, and just plain bad work of great writers. I guess the journey of my journey as a writer sort of folds right into how I ended up writing this book more recently, which is to say that as a writer, I think I've sort of like failed almost as often as I've succeeded. And in fact, I think my batting average is roughly exactly zero or exactly even. Um, and this was something that for a long time, as a writer, really freaked me out, really worried me, especially in the beginning when I was, sort of getting started, because I had this sense in my head that from all the writers that I loved, when I was younger, and all the writers that I sort of, idolized and aspired to be like, that they were sort of born with this sort of like genius that made them as amazing as they were, right? And the example I talk about in the introduction to Revisionaries is F. Scott Fitzgerald, who I was just obsessed with in college and still am obsessed with. I'm sort of writing a whole book about him right now. Fell in love with The Great Gatsby in high school and all the rest, right? I had this idea, and I think we kind of get this idea from a lot of places, but our culture, more broadly sort of encourages this idea that, the greats of in whatever field, right? Arts, science, technology, etc. They're just born different from the rest of us. They're just, blessed with some gift, right? We talk about their gifts that possibly once upon a time people believed, maybe some of us still do, that these gifts are like bestowed divinely upon certain creators, people who are sort of lucky enough to get those things, or that maybe now in sort of the 21st century, maybe more of our perspective is like it's genetics or something like that, and some of us are born with these sort of like magical abilities, or to do something better than other people can do, right? To run faster, to perform a piano concerto at age 5, whatever it is, right? And if you think about it, right, our we just hear stories all the time about these kind of singular figures, right, who are just able to do what no one else can do, right? And so we think about these writers who are just such great geniuses. Yeah, when I was in college, I fully believe this, and so wanting to be a writer, I felt like I, without even really realizing it, I realized that I wanted just somebody to tell me, like, am I one of these geniuses or not, right? Like, just clear it up, tell me now if I'm not, and I'll, I guess, go do something else and be sad about it. Or maybe, I can go to, my writing professor, or somebody else will sort of tap me on the shoulder and say, like, you are good enough. So I ended up signing up for this class I was in college. I was a creative writing major. I convinced one of my professors to let me into this special graduate class with all the graduate students, and it was a class called Hemingway, Fitzgerald, Faulkner, Fitzgerald, and Hemingway. Sorry, three white guys, of course. But it was a whole class about these three great American authors, and I kind of thought, okay, I'm going to take this class. You have to read like almost everything they've ever written, and I'll do that, and I'll figure out like what do they know that I don't know, and then I'll learn their secret or something like that, or I'll figure out if I have anything like their level of talent or ability, right? So yeah, and very quickly this all backfired, which was we started reading Faulkner, and I immediately was like, I don't even understand any of this. I'm totally lost. Obviously, I'm not a great writer. I'll never be a good writer because I have no idea what The Sound and the Fury is even about. And so I was, already felt like a failure, basically. Then we got to F. Scott Fitzgerald, and I knew The Great Gatsby already from high school. We read Tender as the Night, which I really loved. And then we started reading this book that he was writing when he died, which is a novel called The Love of the Last Tycoon. And it's pretty terrible. Just to be blunt, like no offense to Mr. Fitzgerald, but it's just really bad. And I was shocked reading it as a younger writer, and I thought, oh my God, he really fell apart, and poor Zelda was crazy, and he was dealing with his alcoholism and all this other stuff, and obviously he just like wasted his talent. Like that was sort of the idea of it that I had, that he had been a genius, and then it all sort of fell apart. Um, and this became a weird obsession of mine, and this will tie into what we talk about later, which is, I really believe as a writer, one of the things we have to do is sort of follow our obsessions, as weird as they might be. And I became obsessed with unfinished novels, and it started spending a lot of time sort of digging into the details behind all these fun, sort of weird unfinished books. And I started with The Love of the Last Tycoon, the F. Scott Fitzgerald book. And I think I wanted to try to figure out, sort of like what went wrong, with that book. And what I found when I started digging into it was actually totally different from what I expected. It wasn't a story where he had once had this super like easy time writing The Great Gatsby and Tender as the Night because he was such a great genius, and then it all fell away. It was just that he'd always worked really, really hard on all of those other projects, and that with this last book, he just unfortunately, he had a heart attack and he died. It was his third heart attack in a year. He was not taking very good care of himself, which is another good lesson to learn. That self-care is important to the creative process. But he actually was not drinking heavily at that point. He had mostly gotten sober in his final year. He was working really hard on this book. And unfortunately, he just ran out of time. So he died while the book was only about a third of the way written, and he wasn't already not happy with it. He knew that the writing wasn't as good as he needed it to be, and he planned on rewriting it all. In the future, one of the notes he left for himself was basically rewrite this all over again, basically. And so yeah, what I realized was he wasn't a genius because he was born with some sort of like magical gift that I didn't have, but rather he was a genius because he worked really, really, really hard at it. And he, obviously he rewrote this book, even the one that he didn't finish, like 3 or 4 times, the parts that he had written by hand, and then he typed them, and then he, made more edits to that, and on and on. He made these elaborate outlines, sort of looking into all these different things. And so, anyway, the long story short, I realized that, yeah, that he was not a genius who succeeded at everything he ever tried to do. In fact, he failed all the time. And this wound up being true for almost all the other writers that I started looking into. And so that's what led to me ultimately writing Revisionaries. I wanted to share the stories of all these different writers that I loved and that I've idolized over the years, but have sort of realized that there was a lot of sort of mess and failure and even just plain bad work, right, along the way to the great successes that we remember them for. Um, And yeah, and so ultimately I started writing a couple of different sort of columns for the website Electric Literature about these. I think I wrote about 13 columns over the course of a couple of years about different books. I did one about Salinger. I did one about Alan Moore, the comic book artist and graphic novelist. I did ones. These are ones that weren't in the book. I did one about the writer Osamu Dazai, Japanese author. Anyway, the more I looked, the more I found, stories like these just everywhere, and they made me feel a lot better. I said I would come back around to my journey as a writer, and the short version is I wrote a lot of books that didn't sell or weren't very successful, or especially early on. When I finished I went to an MFA at Columbia. When I got out of there, I was working on a book. It was going to be a young adult novel about boys in a boarding school. Worked really hard on that for a couple of years. I tried to sell it. Nobody was interested. Started over with a new book, another young adult book that was going to be about a family that lives on a boat and sails around the world. Nobody was interested in that. We didn't go anywhere. And I knew on one level that I was learning a lot from all these things that I was writing, that even if they weren't selling, I felt like I was getting better. But at the same time, I was getting more and more frustrated, thinking like, if this was going to happen, it would just happen. I wrote a third book after that I can't even talk about. It was so bad. It was, I think, the worst of all of them. I didn't even try to send that to anybody. I think I showed it to my spouse, and she agreed with me that it was pretty bad. And then I just put it in a drawer and moved on. And then I started writing a bunch of short stories, just trying to kind of like come up with new ideas. And I wrote in one year, I challenged myself to write 40 new short stories. And just to kind of like, I needed to do something where it didn't matter if one of them was terrible, because I just wanted to like get to try something new every week. And eventually a bunch of those stories turned into my debut novel, which is called The Unchangeable Spots of Leopards. And the book opens with the narrator talking about how he's lost every novel he's ever written, which for me was a way of sort of writing about my life up until that point, failing to write novels, or writing novels that nobody wanted to read. And yeah, so anyway, I found a way to kind of turn that failure, or all those frustrations, into material, and then wrote about those. I ended up writing, also kind of through those stories that I wrote that year, I ended up writing some pieces that turned into my second book. This is Why We Came to the City, that came out a couple of years after The Unchangeable Spots of Leopards. And at this point, I kind of thought, I'm on a roll. I've got two books out in span of a couple of years, right? Obviously, it's all easy sailing from here. And lo and behold, it wasn't to be. The next book I tried to write didn't go anywhere. Nobody liked it. And that one ended up back in the drawer. I wrote another book after that. And this was sort of early in 2016. Nobody liked that one either. That one was only published in French, which is a very weird story. But my French editor liked it. So people in France have read it, but no one in America has really read it. And at this point, I've sort of moved on from it. But again, I was sort of realizing that, here I am. I thought I'd sort of gotten through the rough patch on the way to easy success in the future. And what I've kind of come to realize now is that that never really happens, or at least it's probably, it doesn't happen for a lot of us. There's always going to be more failures sort of mixed in with any of the successes. And the important part for us is to sort of realize that we have to persevere through those sort of dry spells, rough patches, whatever you want to call them, and keep going, because there's always something good around the corner. We don't know how far away, but if we keep writing, we'll eventually get there. That's what I found over and over again with a lot of the Revisionaries books that I was reading, which was a lot of these writers had written, amazing books, and then written other ones that nobody liked, and then gone back and, written other ones that were even better. And so that perseverance, I realized, kind of ultimately is kind of like the secret. After about 5 or 6 years of floundering and trying to write these other books that didn't work out, I finally, this past year, published another novel, Our Narrow Hiding Places, which came out in the fall. And it was came out actually about 2 months before Revisionaries. So after years of frustration, ended up publishing two books 2 months apart. So anyway, I think the lesson that I learned from all this is just that you have to kind of keep pushing, and in particular, both of these new books kind of came out of things that I was really interested in. I didn't know if other people would be as interested as I was, but they both wound up becoming, I think, books that other people have really enjoyed. Our Narrow Hiding Places is sort of inspired by my grandmother's World War II story, and a lot of sort of stories that I've always been really fascinated with that she told me about her life as a child during World War II. There was a voice in my head saying, nobody wants to read another book about World War II, forget it. But I'm glad I ignored it and followed my obsessions, and decided to write about it anyway. So yeah, so anyway, that's the sort of the journey part of the piece that I wanted to talk a little bit about. And I also wanted to share, if I have a few minutes left here, it looks like I do. I wanted to talk about this idea of obsessions, and one of the chapters in particular in Revisionaries, that I'm not going to have time to read the whole thing, unfortunately, but maybe this will give you a little taste of it. It's a chapter about an author that I really love, Shirley Jackson, who is the author of The Haunting of Hill House, and sorry, what's the other one that we were just talking about before? We have always lived in the castle, and the short story The Lottery, which remains one of the most popular short stories ever written. Yeah, I was really particularly fascinated with her final book that she again unfortunately passed away on the younger side. She passed away in 1965 while she was still working on a book called Come Along with Me. And what I thought was really fascinating about this book is, which it's been published. It's sometimes collected with some of her shorter works. I think there's a newer collection that has it in there, but it's only really about 75 pages long. It's just kind of the beginning of a book that would have been much longer and more interesting. But what kind of really fascinated me about it is the main character in that book, Come Along with Me, is a woman whose name is Angela Motorman. And she speaks to dead spirits, which is something that Shirley Jackson was really obsessed with. And even though it was told many times that like writing about witchy stuff was not literary, she ignored that, thankfully, and wrote a lot of, all the amazing things that she wrote, which are often quite spooky. And yeah, so she continued that with Come Along with Me. But what I really particularly was obsessed with was that Angela Motorman, the main character in this novel, begins the novel by leaving home after the death of her husband, who she's been married to for a long time. And it's sort of implied, although it's not totally clear, that maybe she's killed him. I think if the book would have kept going, we might have found out more about that. But either way, she feels this like incredible delight and freedom in the wake of the death of her husband. And we don't know the full story as to why in the book she would have been so happy that her husband was dead. But we do know that in real life, Shirley Jackson had this very sort of frustrating marriage to a man named Stanley Hyman. They fell in love when they were in college together. And he became a literary critic, and she started writing, she was writing fiction. And in the beginning, they had this sort of, wonderful, romance. They wrote together, they edited the school literary journal together. He fell in love with her supposedly after reading one of her short stories in class, and then like went and found her because he was so taken with the story that she wrote. So it has this sort of like really romantic start, and then unfortunately, sort of things fall apart fairly quickly. Stanley didn't believe, Stanley believed that they were in some sort of open relationship, which is not seemingly exactly how Shirley saw it. And so he was cheating on her all the time. She felt terrible about sort of how their relationship was going. She ended up becoming, spending a lot of her time, unfortunately, that she wanted to spend writing, raising their children. She was frustrated constantly that when they moved to Bennington so that he could be a professor at Bennington College, that people didn't know who she was. They didn't know, people in town didn't read any of her, had never read her work. People just called her Mrs. Hyman, even though she didn't change her name. And she was the quiet wife of the boisterous, quirky new professor in town. And she hated Bennington. She hated all the small-minded people that she felt lived there. But she used that anger and that frustration that, it's sort of, I call it here kind of like a pet peeve of the people in the town, to write The Lottery, the short story that became so popular at the New Yorker, that people wrote more letters about it to the New Yorker than anyone had ever written about any other story before. And she kept on kind of following that impulse to write "quote unquote" nasty stories, as the people in the town put it, about the lottery that made them look bad and uncivilized. And she channeled all of that into her work. So she suffered from agoraphobia, and that becomes a big theme in We've Always Lived in the Castle. And anyway, she wound up writing all these sort of wonderful books that were sort of channeled by her frustrations and her pet peeves. To bring it back around again, Stanley Hyman, ultimately, right as she was sort of writing Come Along With Me, she was contemplating finally separating from him and leaving him. And so writing this book was about basically, sort of a fantasy almost of what it would be like to be free of him. And I'm just going to read this last little bit. I know I'm low on time here, but I just wanted to share a little bit about what that book is and what she wrote about it. In the spring of 1965, author Shirley Jackson embarked on a cross-country college lecture tour in her new MG sedan. The cost of the car would be completely covered by the speaking fees that she was earning for the 5 lectures she'd deliver. After the tour, she'd settled back at home with intentions to rest and continue working on her latest novel, Come Along With Me. In one of her final diary entries, she described it as, quote, a funny book, a happy book. A few months later, in August of 1965, Shirley Jackson passed away during an afternoon nap. Doctors would later give the official cause as coronary occlusion due to arteriosclerosis, with hypertensive cardiovascular disease as a contributing factor. Her death was met by an outpouring of affection from readers and publishers. Her last 2 books, The Haunting of Hill House and We've Always Lived in the Castle, had been great successes, though her most significant claim to fame was, and probably remains, the single short story, The Lottery, published in the New Yorker in 1948 and present in American literary and political conversation ever since. Come Along With Me was only about 75 manuscript pages at the time of her death, 6 brief, mostly connected episodes. 3 years later, Stanley Hyman would publish it, along with a selection of her essays and stories, including Janice, the story that had made him fall in love with her 27 years earlier. In the collection, Hyman praised these shorter works effusively in his preface, but of Come Along With Me, he wrote only that it was, quote, the unfinished novel at which Shirley Jackson, my late wife, was at work at the time of her death in 1965. She rewrote the first 3 sections. The remaining 3 sections are in first draft. In one of Jackson's final diary entries, she wrote about finally feeling unblocked after a long depression, following President Kennedy's assassination and Hyman's affairs, but beginning to work on Come Along With Me had brought her incredible joy. The novel's about a woman named Angela Motorman, whose husband has just died to her great delight, and about the excitement and freedom she feels in the wake of his death. Jackson concluded her diary entry with these repeated words: laughter is possible, laughter is possible, laughter is possible. And then I'm just going to wrap it up here. Our work should be the place where we feel the most freedom. Indeed, for many of us, it may be the only place in our lives where we can truly be free. This isn't to say there aren't risks involved, of course. Writing The Lottery might have made life in North Bennington harder for Shirley Jackson than it was before, but would she have gotten to We Have Always Lived in the Castle without first taking that leap and risking some neighborly disfavor? One drawback of having an active imagination can be how easily we spin up a mental maelstrom of resentment for simply speaking our minds honestly. It helps to remember that these same fears have been faced down by many others before us, and that the reason we still admire some of these geniuses today is that they not only allowed themselves grudges, spite, and frustration, but also channeled those impulses into shaping their greatest work. All right. And I'll wrap it up there, and I'm happy to answer some more questions about Shirley and her work or the book in general at the end. But I think we've got some writing to do, and I don't want to cut into that time. And the two prompts that I picked for us today are both inspired by Shirley Jackson. They're actually built off of there's prompts in Revisionaries after each of these chapters. And this is one of the ones. This is sort of split into two parts, inspired by Shirley. So in another book, Writing Down the Bones, a great writing craft guide that I use in some of my classes, author Natalie Goldberg says, quote, "Your obsessions elicit deeper emotions, deeper energy. They are what you will come back to in your writing over and over again, and you'll create new stories around them, so you might as well give in to them." So my question for you guys tonight is, what are some of your obsessions? First, we're going to try to think of at least 5 obsessions, and then choose one of those to write about for the rest of the time for a few minutes. And you can write anything you want about them, but what are some obsessions of yours? Maybe particularly things that you have never thought about writing about before. Excellent. Were you guys ready for part 2? All right. So this is much harder for me. It may be easier for others, but just I think my disposition, I tend to not focus that much on the things that I hate, or I'm sort of somebody who tries not to focus on that side of things very much. But what I've found, and Shirley Jackson kind of helps me embrace this a little bit, is that I think sometimes the things we hate again, as much as I try to be sort of like a optimistic and joyful writer, I think sometimes the things we hate are even more powerful as inspirations for us. Especially if you're someone maybe even like me who has a hard time sort of like expressing your frustrations and anger. Maybe you guys aren't like that. Or you feel like you can't talk about the stuff that bothers you as much. I find fiction is just like the best way for me to get that out. So on the flip side, sort of in the spirit of Shirley Jackson, what do we hate? We aren't only passionate about the things we love. To balance out the list of obsessions, we can make a second list, this time of your biggest pet peeves. And I just threw out a couple of random ones. These aren't necessarily mine. Gum chewing, golf, The Bachelor, the music of Nickelback, whatever sets you off, embrace it. The stranger, the better. Write down 5 pet peeves and hatreds, and then just like before, try to choose one to kind of focus about and write a little bit longer about. I'll just add one really quick thing here, which is this is one where I think a lot of times the more specific you can be, the better. It gets harder, I think, sometimes to write about like broad things that we hate, inequality or things like that. There's stuff like that, of course, I think hopefully we all hate. But like what's really specific, something you hate that you feel like other people aren't with you on, I think sometimes can be helpful. And the last thing I'll say is you don't necessarily need to get into like things that are traumatic for you or upsetting for you. This is more like things that you enjoy hating almost. But again, you can go whichever direction with it you want, but it doesn't have to be focused on something quite that negative or painful to be productive anyway. I guess basically what I would say is, if you are someone who like me, who tends to kind of sit on these things and not bring them up as much as possible, right? Or if there are things that you think like this the last one is a great one. People who don't use their turn signals when they're driving, right? Oh, that bothers everybody, so it can't be maybe that's something that a lot of people are bothered by. So maybe it's not interesting enough to write about, right? But it's interesting to you, and it's something that you come back to, and maybe it bothers you even more than most people, right? So yeah, so you could use that in something that you're writing, right? And maybe it's just something, it could even just be a thing that you like a characteristic you give to a character that you really don't like or something, or that would be a wonderful like character trait for a villain in a story, right? Like, they never use their blinkers when they're driving. That's such a great way to sort of demonstrate to the reader that this is a thoughtless person, right? All right, excellent. Yeah, I know we got a few minutes left. So I'd love to, yeah, if you guys have questions about this or Shirley Jackson or anything really, happy to chat for a while.
Yeah, fabulous. Would love to open up to any questions if people have them. Feel free to put them in the chat, or you can unmute and ask your questions for Christopher. Unless anybody has one to start, I have one. I've been wondering.
Sure.
You have mentioned this persistence of writing all of these novels over these years, and I am wondering, how do you know when it is time to stop trying with a novel? When it is time to be like, all right, this one isn't working, I
Yeah.
gotta move on to something else. What is it about that you're like, okay, that's where
Yeah.
we are?
It's really hard because I think one thing I've had to accept about myself is that I'm really good at talking myself into thinking it's great, even if it maybe isn't. Later on, I think after some distance, it's easier to see that there are some flaws there or something like that that were, just I don't know. Sometimes it's just a matter of, taking something that I thought was really great and finally showing it to someone else, and maybe that's now it might be my agent or even my editor, and hopefully somebody would stop me before I sent it to her, but something that I'll share with someone that I trust, and they might hopefully be honest enough with me to let me know, like, this is just not your best. And that's hard. It's hard to ask people to read your work, because it's a big imposition, takes a lot of time, and then I think it's even harder to also, like, you've been spending a lot of time on this and it's not really working out. It's hard to hear, but I think important ultimately in the process.
Completely. Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Susie, go for it.
Thank you. So I really love the idea of like failure as a jumping off point and as a springboard. There was a book I read by Sarah Lewis many years ago when I was trying to finish my dissertation, and it was very helpful. But
Okay.
I wondered, as far as writing like long form, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, how do you like break it down into a manageable project? Let's say you have a good idea, or you have an idea that you really are obsessed with and you really like.
Yeah.
It seems that it's kind of sustainable, but I'm having a hard time picturing how to get to the end.
Yeah, it's tricky. For there are times when I think what I like to say is, that I'll often sort of commit to a certain amount of like writing per week, that I want to do like a certain number of words to write per week. And that helps to some degree, because then I'll set a goal often of like 3,000 words a week, which would be like sort of 500 words 6 days out of the seven, I guess, or something like that, or maybe if I'm doing my math right. Um, and I can write a little more on one day if I have some extra time, and if another day gets busy, then I don't write that day. That's okay. But that's one way to sort of like break it up into something. And then at some point, I'll start to see like, okay, I've got 10 pages here or 15 pages here, like this is something where, like, okay, if I do that again for one more week, then I've got 30 pages or 45 pages. And um, sometimes that can help to then like map it out so that I can sort of see it getting bigger along the way. But I don't know, other times, like, I'm kind of in a phase right now where I think I'm spending a lot more time just kind of thinking about the bigger project and not actually doing a lot of, writing, which is frustrating. I'd rather be just writing and trying it out. But so in those periods, sometimes I'll switch it out. Instead of writing a certain number of words a week, I'll sort of commit to, okay, I'm going to sit in my office for a certain number of, like, minutes per day, something like that. And something similar where, if let's say I dream of being able to spend a whole hour in there, but a lot of days it's too busy. I'm teaching full time. I've got 2 kids. I've got a dog now. So just all these things that are constantly kind of taking up time. But yeah, then I might say like, okay, 60 minutes, roughly 5 days a week or something, or 4 days a week, and then try to like, just do that. And a lot of times that helps because then if I'm just sitting there thinking the whole time, that's okay. But a lot of times I'll get bored and then I'll just start writing. So that actually kind of helps a little bit. But I do like to kind of, yeah, like chunk it into smaller pieces, and that helps it feel like any amount of progress is getting a little closer to the final goal. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I know we are really tight on time. I know there is one more question in the chat.
Oh,
I want
okay.
to make sure that we can close out for anyone who needs to hop. So I we'll keep going, but I do really encourage you to get in touch with Kristopher if you do have questions. Elisa, hopefully you're able to do that. Here are all the ways that you can do that. So please do stay connected. You can follow Kristopher on Instagram at Kristopher Jansma, same on X at Kristopher Jans there, and then you can reach out via email at jansmac@newpaltz.edu. Please do. If you have any questions or you want to get in touch, you can also let us know at Girls Right Now, and we can always connect as well. But yeah, thank you so much for being here tonight. And it is now a very exciting opportunity. We are going to spin the wheel to see who is going to win their free copy of Revisionaries. I'm excited for you. Right, let's see. Susanna looks like fabulous.
Yeah.
Susie, is that you? Probably.
Yes.
Fabulous. Wonderful. So we will shoot you a message so that we can make sure that we have the correct place to send that. But thank you so much. I hope you enjoy. I'm sure you will.
Thank you.
And for those of you who did not win, those of us who are not Susie, please do. I make sure you get out and get your own copy. Oh, we're seeing we live in Amsterdam. But please do make sure to go out and get your own copy of Revisionaries. It is really remarkable. There are so many fantastic writing tips in here about how to kind of I conceptualize your own work, things to try. If you're in a tough spot writing, there's a lot of great tips to kind of start things. There's tips for how to say goodbye to work that isn't working. There's a lot of really great stuff going on there. And with that, please do, if you are a guest here with us this evening and you would like to become a mentor or mentee with Girls Right Now, we would love to have you. Enrollment is open for our summer cycle, which runs from the beginning of July to the end of September. We have a bunch of different journeys or programs that you can be a part of. We would absolutely love to have you in any of them. You can check them out at girlsrightnow.org/journeys. And with that, thank you for staying for an extra minute. I appreciate it. Please do follow us on all socials. We are just at Girls Right Now. We would love to see you over on our Instagram, Twitter, on Blue Sky, on all of the different platforms. Follow us so you can see all the cool stuff we're doing. And once again, thank you so much, Kristopher, for being here with us. It was so wonderful to hear your story and to write together in community with you. And yeah, I thank you everyone so much for being here. It was wonderful to have you. Have a good night.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
I'm adding a couple things in the chat for Alyssa and
Oh,
anyone else. And
amazing. Thank you so much.
yeah, no problem. Writer's block. There's a whole section on Octavia Butler's very dramatic writer's block in the book, and a link to an article that I read that really helped me kind of get through that. So
Brilliant. Thank you
awesome.
so
Thanks,
much.
everybody. Good night.
Have a good one. Good night.